Can you afford a lawyer and court time? The average cost for a 2-day trial in BC is now $26,000. You might have to mortgage your house to have your case heard, if you have a house, of course. And with cuts to legal aid, more people are denied access to justice. Some are going to court without legal representation, in fact. So what needs to change so that people can solve their legal problems in a timely way? It's a good question to ask during BC Law Week, which is underway right now. And Gavin Hume is president of the Law Society of BC, which regulates the province's lawyers. The society is working on ways to make the system more accessible. Initiatives like having paralegals perhaps take on more of the work that lawyers do, which would not cost quite as much. You can phone us with your thoughts on this, and here are the numbers: 604-669-3733, toll-free 1-800-825-5950, on the cell star or pound 690. What barriers have you faced yourself accessing justice? What would make the system work better to solve people's legal problems? A couple of questions for you. And Gavin Hume, welcome to BC Almanac today. Good to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
How serious a problem has this become in recent time here in BC?
Well, I think it is quite a serious problem, and I wouldn't restrict it to recent time. It's been a problem that's been growing over a number of years, and the figures that we've seen indicate approximately 70% of the people in the middle class, if I can describe it as that, have difficulties obtaining legal representation in their needs in court.
70% sounds huge.
It is huge.
And this is the middle class that you're talking about.
Yes, the lower income to middle class income.
What are some examples that come to mind, and how people are directly affected by that?
Well, it would be, for example, in a family dispute, the difficulties associated with dealing with a family dispute requiring representation vis-a-vis access to the children, custody of the children, the compensation that needs to be provided by one spouse to the other. Having legal representation in those contexts is one example where it is becoming very expensive for a variety of reasons.
And the perception that the person with the deepest pockets wins, how worrisome is that trend?
Well, I think that is a concern. It's something that needs to be dealt with. Deeper pockets results in the ability, obviously, to pay for the representation. But our system requires, I think, both sides to be heard, and without representation from both sides, perhaps there's an advantage. Our courts, of course, strive to permit both sides to give an opportunity for both sides to be heard. So they work as best they can, given the constraints that presently exist.
Lawyers' fees, that's part of this story.
That's true.
And what are some of the key factors that you think are at play here? Why so few people are able to pursue, their legal problem through the courts or through a lawyer?
Right. I think there are a variety of factors. One is simply the overhead costs that are associated with running a law firm. There are a considerable number of expenses associated with the space, the resources required, the technical requirements, the technology requirements, the staff requirements, compensation for the staff that are required. So that's one aspect of it. And lawyers, like all of us, want to earn a decent living. So it's a desire, having spent 7 years of education plus a year of articling, they don't want to be earning less than the plumber who comes in does the plumbing in their house.
There are also costs associated with delays in the system, right? And this is where lawyers have a vested interest that I think some people are concerned about. The longer you can delay a case, the more billing time that's coming with that.
And the delay isn't necessarily associated with the lawyer on the other side causing a delay. It can arise as a result of the lack of facilities, and probably more significantly at this stage, particularly in the provincial court, the lack of judges. There was a report written by the provincial court where they indicated they were understaffed. That, of course, goes back to the amount of money available at the provincial level to pay for provincial judges. So it's the balancing of all of these needs from a financial perspective, and obviously government makes those decisions as to how to balance between education, health, other social services, the needs for highways, and the needs for the appointment of judges. There's a significant cost associated with the appointment of a judge, not just the judge's salary, but all the support services that are required, sheriffs, space, court clerks. There's just a large cost associated with each judge that's appointed. And there's a judgment call that has to be made about that. But you're right, lack of judges cause delay, and that gives rise to expense also.
Gavin Hume is my guest, president of the Law Society of BC. It's about 20 before the hour. We're asking our listeners to tell us what you're thinking about access to justice. What are the barriers that you see? What are some of the solutions, too, that you would like to tell us about? 669-3733 around Metro Vancouver, 1-800-825-5950, star or pound 690 on the cell phone. The Law Society, which governs the province's lawyers, Gavin Hume, you're also looking at the possibility of paralegals. These aren't lawyers, but a different profession, taking on more of the work that lawyers would do, and that's not as expensive, is it?
That's correct. A paralegal would be charged out at a lower rate, and so our objective is to see if we can expand the role of paralegals so as to provide a cheaper product, if you will, to our clients. And there are several aspects to that, but the main issue that we're dealing with is, or the main way we're trying to deal with this, is to work with the courts to see if they would agree with us that we can expand the opportunity for paralegals to appear in front of the judges. At the moment, they are restricted. And the right of access to a court is controlled by the courts, so we have to work with the courts to develop a process wherein paralegals, working under the supervision of lawyers and as a result producing a quality product for the client, can appear in front of those courts.
I'm told that the Law Society has been working on this for years and that there hasn't really been much headway. Why is that?
Well, we haven't been working on this particular topic of paralegals. We've been looking at the issue of access to legal services for many years and from a variety of perspectives. So, for example, and this is a technical term, we've dealt with unbundling, which is a process whereby a lawyer can provide a limited service in a court setting. So, for example, going back to our family law example, the lawyer might only appear on behalf of the applicant or one of the parties with respect to the access issue, and not the maintenance issue. So creating a situation where a lawyer is permitted to limit his or her services to one aspect of the litigation that's before it. So that's one thing we've done. We've dealt with the ability to improve the ability of lawyers to provide pro bono services. We've contributed a part of our fee to the pro bono, to the Law Foundation, which then disperses it to pro bono activities. So we've worked on this. It's a very complex problem. There is no one solution.
We're going to hear more about pro bono in just a couple of minutes when Jamie McLaren from Access Pro Bono joins us in the studio. We also want to hear from our callers, our listeners on this. What needs to change in the system so that people can have their legal problems dealt with efficiently and in an affordable way? Elf is calling us from Hope with some thoughts. Elf?
Yes, the Campbell administration closed 5 courthouses, especially in Hope. They have to come from Boston Bar 80 miles to show. Why not bring them back? That'd help a lot.
Closure of courthouses, this was, I believe, about 10 years ago that this happened. And has that created a challenge for the system to deal with?
And Mr. Dowse, in his recent study, indicates that in fact created a challenge. Again,
he reviewed legal aid, right?
He reviewed the provision of legal aid, and he indicated that one of the difficulties associated with obtaining legal aid is transportation. And the problem of, as our caller has just suggested, of moving from one geographic location to another, the distance associated.
Would you agree that these courthouses should be reopened in these communities?
Well, again, it's an economic decision, and it's a judgment call that the government has to make. The government in power has to make with respect to where to spend the funds that we provide, and as we all know, there are many challenges. It would be wonderful if we could have every courtroom and every judge available as we would need it immediately, but that's not realistic given today's economy that we have to operate in.
Well, thank you for the call and reminding us that has happened.